He woke before dawn, not from a scream, not from noise, from the feeling that the air had grown heavier. This happened in Kyiv rarely, but it always ended the same way, with war. The guard rose on the rampart, adjusted his cloak, and looked down into the darkness where the Dnipro breathed cold. The ice had not yet fully set. The water moved slowly, carrying fragments like the shields of fallen warriors. The night was quiet. Too quiet. He did not have time to think. The knife slid under his jaw almost gently. The blood did not gush. It simply came out, warm and thick, and fell onto the snow. The white disappeared. Kyiv was still asleep. Wooden roofs held the warmth of the night. In the courtyards, fires smoldered. On the podil, the air smelled of fish, tar, and damp earth. The city breathed evenly, like a person who does not yet know that someone has already come for them. The second guard died by the gates. The third, already inside. The gates were not broken. They were opened. Kyiv never fell by force. It fell by overconfidence. Once, this was just a place. Rivers met here like scars. People, like shadows. Polians settled on the hills. Varangians arrived by boats. Merchants carried silver from the south and furs from the north. There was no unity here, only survival. But survival brings wealth, and wealth brings enemies. Kyiv became a knot, and knots are always pulled apart. When the first bodies were found by the ramparts, no one screamed. People looked on in silence. Silence was experience. Everyone in Kyiv knew, if blood appears quietly, there will be a lot of noise ahead. The boyars gathered in the princely courtyard. Old, cautious, with heavy gazes. They did not ask who. In Kyiv, people rarely asked who. Here they asked when again. In the middle of the courtyard lay the body of the prince. He did not look majestic. Death leaves no majesty. His wife stood nearby. She did not cry. Her face was calm, almost indifferent. But those who had known her for a long time felt the cold, the same cold as the Dnipro in winter, when the water still moves, but already kills. She looked at everyone and silently counted. In Rus, power was not passed on. It was taken by the sword, by conspiracy, by the betrayal of relatives. And Kyiv knew this better than anyone. From the north, boats were already coming. Long, narrow, fast. On their prows, carved beasts with hollow eyes. The men in them did not sing or laugh. They counted. How many towers? How many warriors? How much could be taken? Varangians never asked whether they could enter. They asked how much it would cost. Kyiv was not afraid of war. It was afraid of disorder, because disorder destroys trade, and without trade, a city becomes prey. So the boyars spoke of peace, of agreements, of gold, and the woman remained silent. She knew that gold does not save. Gold only postpones. That night there was more fire in the city. Not fires, torches. Warriors moved in pairs. Doors closed earlier. People stopped speaking aloud even at home. Kyiv tightened. And when a city tightens, someone always breaks. The first clan made a mistake. They decided they could take more than they were allowed. They gathered their men and left the courtyard, certain that the night belonged to them. But Kyiv always has a longer memory than any clan. By morning, they were gone. Without screams, without trial, without words, and the city understood someone had taken power. The woman looked at the empty courtyard, and for the first time in a long while allowed herself a brief smile, because this was only the first blood. Kyiv did not ask who was in charge now. It felt it. A city always senses a change of power before people do. The air grows denser. Conversations become shorter. Doors close not because of the cold, but because of anticipation. After that night, Kyiv no longer slept deeply. The boyars gathered again. This time they sat farther apart. Not because they distrusted each other, but because they already knew how this ends. Each of them remembered how quickly a courtyard can be emptied, how easily a name disappears from people's mouths. Power had changed, but the faces remained the same. Almost. The woman sat in the princely seat, not as a ruler, as a shadow. She did not give orders. She did not swear by the gods. She did not promise peace. She listened. And that was enough for everyone to speak more carefully. In Rus, there were no crowns. There was the agreement of those who held swords. And the woman knew this. That was why she did not hurry. Envoys came from the north. Not warriors. Envoys. Clean cloaks, calm voices, eyes sliding over the walls as if counting them. They spoke of friendship, of trade, of mutual benefit. Kyiv had heard these words before, and every time, war followed them. The city is large, one of them said, looking at the hills, and very rich. This was not a compliment, it was a warning. The boyars began to speak of tribute, of silver, furs, slaves, of how it is cheaper to pay than to fight, of how peace is also a victory. The woman remained silent. She knew. Only those who fear losing buy peace. That same night, another man disappeared in the city. Not a boyar, not a warrior, a merchant, one who knew whom to pay and how much, one who controlled half of Padil's trade. His body was found in the morning, in the water. The Dnipro did not give him up at once. It was a sign, not for the people, for those who knew how to read between the lines. Kyiv began to cleanse itself, not of enemies, of doubts. People who knew how to talk too much suddenly fell silent. Clans that believed themselves untouchable lost support. Retinues changed their oaths without words, simply moving from one courtyard to another. Power gathered slowly, like a river in winter. And then an idea appeared. Not new, but timely. New people came from the south. They did not carry weapons, they carried books. They spoke quietly, they promised much. They said, now power will come not only from the sword, now it will come from heaven. The old gods watched from the hills, wooden, dark, weathered. They were used to sacrifices and screams, to fear and blood. They did not speak of love, they demanded. The new God was different. He demanded nothing at once. He offered. The boyars listened carefully, because if power is sanctified by heaven, it is harder to take away. The woman listened even more carefully, because she knew any faith brought into a city as a tool will inevitably spill blood. The decision was made quickly. Such decisions are always made quickly, so there is no time to think. Kyiv woke to bells, not battle bells, not alarm bells, new ones. People were led to the river, not by force, at first, by looks, by words, by the fear of standing apart. Children cried from the cold. Adults remained silent. The Dnipro was icy. It did not distinguish between faith and coercion. The idols fell. Wood cracked like human bones. Stone broke, filling the air with dust, as if the past itself did not want to leave. Some screamed, some laughed, some watched in silence and remembered. Those who did not come disappeared. First into the forests, then into the steppe, then into graves without names. They were called rebels, but they simply did not want to be told who to be. The new faith gave power what it lacked, justification. Now any order could be called the will of heaven. Any betrayal, a sin. Any enemy, cursed. The woman watched the city change, how faces grew calmer, how fear became familiar, how people began to watch one another. She knew power had now become stronger and more dangerous. At night she went out onto the rampart. She looked at the Dnipro, at the darkness beyond the river, toward where the boats had once come from. You will come again, she said quietly. Not as a threat, as a fact, because she knew. This city had not finished paying, and the second blood was already waiting. Kyiv was growing rich, not abruptly, not ostentatiously, but steadily. Gold flowed into the city like water into the Dnipro. Trade expanded. Merchants arrived from the south and west, from the north and east. Languages tangled in the markets, but silver sounded the same everywhere. The city grew accustomed to the thought that this would last forever. Wood was gradually replaced by stone. Stone gives a sense of eternity, and that is precisely why it is dangerous. Kyiv began to look unshakable. The new faith took root. Churches grew faster than homes. Bells rang more often than screams. People learned to cross themselves automatically, like clutching a cloak in the cold. Faith ceased to be a choice. It became background. Power was strong, too strong, because when power does not change for a long time, it begins to believe that nothing threatens it. Princely clans multiplied, sons grew, retinues expanded, ambitions became hereditary. Every prince's son knew he was not born to serve, he was born for the throne. At first it looked like disputes, words, insults, glances across the hall, then like rivalry. Who was richer? Who stood closer to the church? Who commanded more warriors? The woman was still there. She became part of the landscape, like a wall or a tower. No one feared her openly. They simply stopped noticing her. But she was the one who saw how the city was changing from within. The first conflict did not occur in Kyiv, and that was symbolic. One of the cities refused to pay what was demanded. It did not declare war. It simply stopped obeying. That was worse than war. The prince gathered an army, quickly, decisively. The campaign was short. The city surrendered. Several courtyards burned. Several bodies remained in the square. It was meant to be a lesson, and it was, but not the one they expected. Other princes saw, if one could punish, then so could they. Rus began to fragment, not at once, not loudly, by habit. Each prince began to think of his own city, of his own retinue, of his own revenues. The word unity remained in prayers. Kyiv was still the center, but it was no longer unquestioned. It was listened to, but not always obeyed. Brothers looked at one another differently. Once, as allies. Now, as obstacles. Swords left their scabbards more often not for wars against outsiders, but for conversations among their own. The first fraternal blood was spilled quickly, without long causes, without grand words. One strike, one mistake, and what had seemed impossible just yesterday became acceptable. After that, it was impossible to stop, because if a brother can kill a brother, why can't everyone? Rus still appeared strong. From the outside, it was feared, it was traded with, it was spoken of. But inside, it was cracking. The woman knew what that meant. She had seen it before, in smaller cities, in clans, in families. A fracture does not begin with an enemy. It begins with the certainty that the enemy is not you. The step was silent. Not everyone noticed, because Kyiv was busy with itself. Merchants still counted profits, princes, retinues, priests, sins. And beyond the horizon, someone was counting cities. When the first distant settlements fell, they were not taken seriously. A raid, an accident, someone else's problem. The woman looked at the map and saw how the lines converged. "They are coming," she said quietly. No one heard her, because Kyiv still believed in stone. Silence came first, not as peace, as a warning. The steppe had been silent for so long that people grew used to it. Merchants returned to the roads. Princes argued over borders. Priests spoke of sins louder than of danger. Kyiv lived, and that was precisely why it did not listen. The first reports were uncomfortable, not frightening. Uncomfortable. Somewhere far away, villages disappeared. Somewhere envoys did not return. Somewhere caravans left the road without explanation. It could be explained in many ways. And it was explained when the messenger arrived. He was not let in at once. He was dirty, exhausted, without gifts. Such men always bring bad news. "They are coming," he said. They did not believe him, because Kyiv had seen enemies before. Varangians came for silver. pechenegs for plunder, Cumans for fear. With all of them one could negotiate, with all of them one could fight. These were different. The second messenger did not make it. The third had no tongue. Then they began to listen. The princes gathered a council. As always, too late, each spoke of his own troops, of his own borders. No one spoke of together. The woman sat aside. She listened as she once listened to the boyars, and she understood. They had already lost. They cannot be stopped separately, she said. And together? They asked. She did not answer. Fire did not come at once. First, smoke. Cities fell quickly, but they did not scream. There was no siege, no demands. There was speed. There was precision. There was the confidence of those who knew. Behind them, there was no one. Retinues did not have time to gather. Alliances broke before they could form. Princes waited for help and did not receive it, because each was saving his own. It was a habit, and it killed. When the enemy came closer, Kyiv finally woke up. Too late. The walls looked strong. Stone always looks convincing, until the first blow. The city prepared for a siege that would never come. Grain was stored. Gates were closed. Prayers were said. They did everything right, except one thing. The enemy did not come to negotiate. The first blow was not against the walls. It was against people. Kyiv saw what it had never seen before. Not a battle, a slaughter. The streets filled with smoke. Wooden structures caught fire faster than people could understand what was happening. Screams came, too late, broken, without hope. Churches fell just like homes. Faith does not protect from fire. The retinues fought desperately, and in vain, because courage does not replace unity. The woman stood on the hill. She saw the city whole, as she once saw its beginning. Now, its end. The Dnipro carried ash, calmly, indifferently. The river will outlive everything. Kyiv burned for a long time, not as a symbol, as a body. Stone cracked, wood vanished, people dissolved. When the fire died out, the city still stood, but it was no longer a city. Those who survived did not speak of defeat. They spoke of survival. Rus did not disappear that day. This is important. It had fallen apart earlier, when it stopped being one. Princes remained. Cities remained. Memory remained. But something vanished forever. Certainty. The woman left Kyiv before dawn, without an escort, without words. She knew. Cities are rebuilt. Empires are not. They say Kyiv remembers this even now. Moments when silence grows too heavy, when the air thickens, when the city cannot sleep. Because history does not end, it simply waits to be repeated again.